Hello everyone, welcome back. This is video 2 of the set of videos that cover chapter 1. We're going to start off by going over each of the 11 organ systems. We're going to kind of give a general overview of these. So we're not going to go into specific details yet because that's the whole point of A&P1 and A&P2. But I want you to know kind of the general idea of each system. What are some of the components? So what's the anatomy? And then what's the physiology? What are some of the general functions of that system? So 4 of the 11 we cover in A&P1. So in A&P1 we cover integumentary system, skeletal system, muscular system, and nervous system. And then in A&P2 we cover the other 7 systems. Before we get to systems, we got to get through chapter 1, Chapter 2, chemistry. Chapter 3, cells. And those 2 chapters, we try not to focus too heavily on chemistry and biology. It's just kind of reviewing and getting you up to speed. So chapter 2 and 3, don't be too scared because it's chemistry and biology. We're just trying to go over some of the information that's going to be helpful for you moving on in this course. It'd be great if you took chemistry and took biology, but those are no longer prereqs for this course. So it's important to kind of get an overview of that information. All right, so chapter 5 is when we get into our first system called the integumentary system. The integumentary system is your skin and associated structures that are in your skin, such as hair, such as fingernails and toenails, such as glands like sweat glands and oil glands. It's a pretty good system to start with because it's not overly complicated, and a lot of the things you've heard of because you see your skin every day and you think about skin sometimes and you try to protect your skin from UV light. And so it's a good system to kind of get us started. So what are some of the functions? Protection's a big one. We've got what's called the epidermis that has a lot of layers of cells to it that offer a lot of protection. Helps regulate our body temperature so we can sweat and cool the body. We can change blood flow to the skin in order to remove heat. So if you're hot, you usually, your skin looks flush or red. Well, that's blood flow to your skin. And if we increase blood flow to the skin, we can remove more heat from the body. Whereas when you're cold, we move blood kind of towards the core of the body, and your skin might look a little more pale. So temperature regulation helps prevent water loss. So we don't want water to just be able to go in or out of the body very easily. So it helps us kind of prevent water loss. One thing you may or may not have heard of is production of vitamin D. So your body can produce some natural vitamin D, but you need sunlight and skin for that process to occur. So that's kind of the basic principles of the integumentary system. Skeletal system are your bones. All right, there's 206 bones in the human body. It also includes any cartilages that are associated with these bones, ligaments, which kind of are connective tissue that holds bones together, and joints. And that's a big one. So that system's going to challenge you because there's a lot of bones to get through. It's a lot of anatomy. All right, so you got to be able to identify bones and some of the structures on the bones. The function you probably know is, protection, like your skull can protect your brain, your ribs can protect your lungs and your heart. Support, it acts as a framework for other structures. And, we build onto the skeleton. So keep in mind, the better you know your bones, the easier later systems become, like muscular system. It also allows body movement, right? Because we can have muscles attached to the bones. So it can help body movement. One big thing is production of blood cells. So inside many of your bones is tissue known as bone marrow. And that bone marrow is what produces all the different cells that are in your blood. So it helps produce your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your platelets. So that bone marrow is very important. It stores minerals, it has a little bit of fat in it, adipose, but primarily those bones are for protection and support and movement. When we move on to the muscular system, hopefully by then we've learned, some study techniques and study habits, and where we feel more comfortable. But again, skeletal system is going to be challenging. Muscular system obviously includes muscles. Depending on your background, you may have heard of many of these muscles like the biceps brachii or the pectoralis major or your quadriceps, femoris muscles. But obviously muscles are there for body movement. They help maintain posture. They generate most of the heat as well. And in fact, if we need more heat, we can stimulate them. All right, so getting back to that temperature regulation, if you are cold, you can generate heat by stimulating muscles. We call it shivering. And when those muscles contract like that, it generates a lot of heat for you. So primarily we're talking about skeletal muscles here. We learn about cardiac muscle when we do the heart and smooth muscle when we do other organs. But these muscles are attached to bones using tendons. So tendons attach muscle to bone, whereas ligaments attach bone to bone. Okay, so once we get through the muscular system, then we're on to the nervous system. And the nervous system is going to be basically our last system in this class, but it takes quite a few chapters to get through that nervous system. As you can imagine, the brain is very complicated, so we kind of study it using one chapter. The spinal cord is a separate chapter. So there's quite a few chapters at the end of the semester, all revolving around the nervous system. So nervous system is brain, spinal cord, and nerves. What does it do? Well, it's a major controlling system. So it controls a lot of other organs. So it's going to control those skeletal muscles. It's going to control your heart. It's going to control your respiratory and digestive system. So controls a lot of processes. It detects things, not only, on the surface of the body, but it also detects internal conditions. So it's going to monitor your blood pressure and blood chemistry and how everything's, looking on the inside. So it's going to monitor a lot of internal conditions. And then it's got, your brain, which provides you, intelligence and behavior and things like that. So that's a big one. And hopefully we get through it and we're successful and we get to move on to A&P2. And in A&P2, we start off with the endocrine system. So the endocrine system consists of glands that produce hormones. These hormones are going to control a lot of internal organs. So these two systems, nervous system and endocrine system, basically control everyone else. All right, they do it differently. Nervous system is very fast acting. Endocrine system's a little slower, but together they control everything. So there's a lot of organs that produce hormones. So we learn, the major organs, including the hypothalamus and pituitary gland and thyroid gland and parathyroid glands, and pancreas produces hormones, and adrenal glands, and ovaries and testes. You typically think of them as reproductive organs, but they also produce hormones. And in fact, most organs in your body produce hormones. We just don't put them all in this system. We put, the ones that, their major job is to produce hormones. So regulation of the body, controlling the body, growth, reproduction, many functions are due to hormones. Then we move on to the cardiovascular system, which we start by learning blood, what's in blood and how it functions. Then we do the heart, look at how the heart works to pump that blood. And then we look at blood vessels, which transport the blood. So transportation is the key word. If you see that word transportation, you're probably, studying the cardiovascular system. It's how things get from point A to point B in the human body. So how do we get nutrients throughout the body? How do we remove waste? How do we get gases? So how do we get the oxygen from your lungs to cells of the body? And then also, how do we transport our immune system? All right, so a lot of our immune system has to get to places, right? It has to get to an infectious organism. So we use our cardiovascular system. Then we do the lymphatic and immune system. So they're kind of a combo system where you have your lymphatics, which help in fluid balance, and then it also helps with your immune system. And in that system, we're going to talk about lymph nodes and lymphatic vessels, but we're also going to talk about organs such as the spleen, the thymus. Bone marrow is very important because that's where all your immune cells are being produced. So that's a very interesting one when we get to the immune system. Then we get to respiratory system, and I think the idea there is to get oxygen. You also have to get rid of carbon dioxide. It's also extremely important in pH regulation. So blood pH. Your blood needs to have a specific pH range. That range is 7.35 to 7.45. And your respiratory system helps keep that pH. But we probably know lungs, trachea, obviously your nose brings in the air, your throat or pharynx, your larynx or voice box. So those are the components of the respiratory system. Digestive system, a lot of organs there. Obviously, mouth, salivary glands, the esophagus, stomach, small intestines, large intestines, but also your liver, your gallbladder, and your pancreas are extremely important. And I think we know why we need a digestive system. We have to be able to get nutrients. So we have to be able to break down large molecules in order to bring in the small molecules. Then we kind of reach the home stretch. When we get to the urinary system, we're getting close to being done. We learn about how kidneys work to remove waste and anything that's, shouldn't be in your blood or is, maybe too high in your blood. We can get rid of it. Also very important in regulating pH of the blood. So we got kidneys, ureters, bladder, urethra. Then the last chapter is reproductive system. And the reproductive system, obviously, we've got female and then male reproduction. And function, obviously, it is to produce offspring. This is sexual reproduction, so the female has to produce an egg, and the males have to produce sperm. So we have gonads that produce those gametes. So ovaries in females, testes in males. Obviously, there's other structures as well, such as a uterus that's going to house the developing fetus. We've got penis that obviously is used for intercourse with the vagina. So you're never ready for reproduction, so they put that at the end of the at the end of the book. But if we get to reproduction, that means we are almost done. All right, so those are the 11 organ systems. So again, go through each of the 11. If you know some of the major organs and know the general function, you're good to go. Next topic is called directional terminology. And we're going to do a separate video lecture for that because that's going to take some time getting through some of these words and describing, how we use those words and what they mean.